There's something uniquely humiliating about being discussed like a line item on a budget spreadsheet. Not argued over, not defended, just reviewed, calculated, and quietly filed under acceptable loss while you're standing right there in your own living room, breathing recycled air and trying not to accidentally make your father cry. That last part is harder than it sounds. My name is Seo Jian. I'm 22 years old. I have a face my grandmother once called dangerously pretty before she crossed herself and changed the subject. A mouth that has never once learned when to stay closed. And one singular ability that has followed me like a shadow since I was 15 years old. I make people feel things they don't want to feel. Not metaphorically. Not the way a sad movie makes you tear up or a good song catches you off guard. I mean, I reach into the emotional frequency of every person within a 20-meter radius and, when I lose control, I rewrite it. Whatever I'm feeling becomes what they're feeling. Rage, grief, shame, longing. It doesn't matter. If it's in me, it gets out. The pack physicians called it empathic projection with involuntary transmission. The pack elders called it spiritually dangerous. My father calls it the reason nobody will keep you. Which brings me to right now, standing in the narrow hallway of our Saha district apartment, while a beta in a suit that costs more than our monthly rent slides a folder across the dining table like he's closing a real estate deal. Because technically, he is. The Huang Pak's terms are final, the beta says. His name is Park Tae-sung, and his emotional frequency is the most aggressively boring thing I've ever felt. Flat, efficient, professional, like a fax machine that learned to walk. Compensation covers the outstanding debt. All of it. My father's hand's still on the table. His relief hits me so clean and fast I have to press my back teeth together to keep from reacting. Not guilt, not grief. Relief. The man is relieved. I've known my father my entire life, and I have felt every shade of his emotion. His quiet pride when my older brother presented as alpha, his hollow resignation the morning my mate assessment came back barren, his carefully maintained distance every time a pack elder looked at me sideways in public. I know him better than he knows himself, which is both the gift and the tragedy of what I am. And right now he feels like a man setting down a bag he's been carrying too long. I am the bag. Jian has medical considerations, my father says, with a particular tone of someone reciting a rehearsed line. He's been assessed twice. He can't carry a pup. Taesung doesn't even blink. The Huang Pak is aware. I let that sit in the air for exactly 3 seconds before my mouth does what my mouth always does. Aware or specifically interested, I ask. Both men look at me. My father with barely contained warning vibrating off him like a plucked string. Taesung with the mild expression of someone reassessing a piece of furniture that just spoke. Because those are very different sentences. Taesung studies me for a moment. I feel the first actual flicker of something from him. Not surprise exactly, more like recalibration. The pack reviewed your full profile, he says carefully. Your fertility status was one factor among several. And the other factors? A pause. Thursday, he says instead of answering. Someone will collect you at 9. He leaves. The door clicks shut. The apartment settles into the specific silence of a conversation that didn't finish honestly. My father turns to me, and I let his emotion wash over me fully this time. The layered mess of it, the relief and the sadness and the guilt he won't ever name out loud because naming it would make it real. Buried under everything, small and stubborn as a weed growing through concrete, is actual love. The kind that doesn't know how to show up correctly. The kind that hurts worse than indifference because at least indifference doesn't pretend. The Huang Pak will take care of you, he says. Dad, I pick up my jacket from the chair. You don't have to make it sound noble. I'm 22, not 12. I understand what's happening. He flinches. Good. I didn't mean for it to come out that sharp, but I also don't entirely regret it. John, I'll pack Thursday morning. I head for my room. I prefer to do humiliating things early in the day. Gets it out of the way. I close my bedroom door. I count to 5. I let the careful blankness I wear in public slide off my face like a mask hitting the floor, and I sit on the edge of my bed and stare at the same water stain on my ceiling I've been staring at since I was 16. The Huang Pak. 4 alphas. The most quietly feared pack structure in Busan. They don't make noise. That's what makes them frightening. Loud packs bark and posture and challenge each other at territory lines. The Huang pack just owns things, and then one morning you wake up and realize they've owned them for years. I've heard three things about them with any consistency. First, they haven't taken a house Omega in over 4 years. Second, the last one left voluntarily after 6 months and refused to say why. Third, they specifically requested me by name. That last part has been sitting in my chest like a swallowed stone since Taisung mentioned it 2 days ago. Packs don't request Barren Omegas by name. They don't review full profiles and decide the infertility is one factor among several. They don't send their best-suited beta to a Saha district department to close the deal personally, unless they know. I close my eyes. I reach out with that part of me I spend most of my energy suppressing. That raw, open nerve that reads the world in feelings instead of words. I feel my father in the next room, the neighbors below, the street outside, and then, faint but unmistakable, threading through the Busan night air like smoke through a window crack. 4 distinct emotional signatures. Calm, waiting, deliberate, pointed directly at me. They don't just know I'm coming. They've been waiting for me specifically. My power sparks up my spine without permission. The water glass on my nightstand rattles. Oh, I think with the particular exhaustion of someone who has never once caught a break. This is going to be a problem. The water glass stops rattling the second I pull my power back in. I'm good at that part, at least. The pulling back. Years of practice makes the leash feel almost natural. Like holding your breath underwater. Uncomfortable but manageable, as long as nothing startles you. I press both palms flat against my thighs and breathe through my nose until the emotional static from outside fades to a dull hum. The 4 signatures disappear like a radio losing signal. There and then, not there. Real enough to leave fingerprints on my nerves. I stare at my ceiling for another 30 seconds. Then I get up and start packing, because apparently that's my life now. Thursday arrives the way uncomfortable things always do. Faster than expected and worse than imagined. The car that collects me is black, expensive, and driven by a man who introduces himself as Shin Dong-yun, pack driver, with the energy of someone who has been professionally unbothered for 30 consecutive years. He takes my single bag without comment, opens the rear door without flourish, and drives through Busan's morning traffic with the calm of a man who has collected far more complicated things than one small, emotionally radioactive Omega. I spend the drive watching the city move past the window. Busan in the early morning is its own specific kind of beautiful. The port district catches the low sun and throws it back in pieces off the water. Street vendors are setting up along Jagalchi Market, the smell of salt and fish and warm soy cutting through the cracked window. School kids in uniforms stream across crosswalks. Everything operating exactly as it always has, completely indifferent to the fact that Seo Jian is being quietly transferred like a certified package. I find it both grounding and deeply annoying. The Huang Pack's main residence is in Hyundai, which tells you everything you need to know about the 4 alphas before you've met them. Not the flashy beachfront properties, the elevated district behind it, where the houses sit behind walls and trees, and the particular silence of people who don't need to prove anything to anyone. The gate opens before the car fully stops. The house is, and I say this as someone who grew up in a Saha district apartment with 1 bathroom and a water-stained ceiling, aggressively beautiful. Traditional architecture updated with clean modern lines, a central courtyard visible through the entrance, stone and dark wood and glass working together in a way that suggests whoever designed it understood that real power doesn't shout. Dongyun carries my bag inside. I follow. The entrance hall smells like cedar and cold morning air, and something underneath both of those things that makes my power twitch like a compass needle near a magnet. Alpha scent. 4 distinct threads of it woven into the walls of this house so deeply they become structural. I've been in alpha spaces before. My brother's apartment, the Pack Elder Hall. But this is different. This is layered. This is 4 separate presences compressed into one building and left to marinate. My nose wrinkles. My power strains against its leash. I tell it firmly to sit down. They're waiting in the main room, Dongyun says, already heading for the stairs with my bag. He says it the way you'd say the meeting starts at 9. Neutral, informational, completely devoid of the warning it absolutely should contain. I straighten my jacket. I remind myself that I have walked into uncomfortable rooms my entire life and survived every single one of them. I remind myself that I am not impressed by powerful alphas. I remind myself that whatever they're feeling, I can feel first, which means I always have information they don't know I have. Then I walk into the main room and every single one of those reminders dissolves instantly. There are 4 of them, which I knew. But knowing a thing and experiencing a thing are different categories entirely. The one nearest the window is the first thing my power registers. Steady, controlled, the emotional frequency of someone who is almost never surprised. He's tall with the kind of quiet physical authority that doesn't need a room to go silent when he enters, because the room just does it automatically. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, arms crossed with the ease of a man who has made 10,000 decisions and regretted maybe 4 of them. He looks at me the way you look at something you've been expecting but aren't entirely sure how to handle. Huang Ji-su, the eldest at 29, pack head. I feel his composure like a cool, flat stone, and underneath it, faint and fast as a blink. Something that feels startlingly like relief. There it is again. Different person, same feeling. I'm starting to sense a theme. Beside him, draped across an armchair with the boneless ease of someone who has never once experienced consequences, is an alpha whose emotional frequency is so loud it almost knocks me back a step. Warm, bright, aggressively curious, like standing next to an open oven. He grins the second he sees me. Actually grins wide and immediate, like I'm something genuinely entertaining that just walked through his door. Huang Minjie, 27, and apparently delighted by my existence, which I find both flattering and suspicious. The third alpha is standing near the far wall and is doing the thing I find most exhausting in people, feeling one thing and performing another. His expression is neutral, almost bored. His emotional signature is anything but. Underneath the carefully maintained surface, I feel something tangled and hot that I can't fully categorize yet. Curiosity, yes. Wariness, definitely. And something else pressed down so firmly it barely has a shape. Huang Seo Jian, 28, looking at me like I'm a problem he hasn't solved the equation for yet. The fourth alpha is the one who stops me completely, not because of how he looks. Though he's not exactly difficult to look at, it's because he's the only one in the room whose emotional frequency I cannot read. Nothing. Clean silence. Like a room with no furniture. That has never happened to me before in my entire life. He meets my eyes across the room and says nothing. His face gives nothing. His emotions give nothing. Huang Taiyang, 28, and somehow, inexplicably, completely invisible to my power. The silence in the room stretches exactly 1 second past comfortable. I smile my most professionally unbothered smile. So, I say pleasantly, which one of you is going to explain why you specifically requested the Barren Omega? The question lands in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Nobody flinches. That alone tells me something. People who aren't expecting a question like that flinch. These 4 don't even blink, which means they rehearsed for this moment, which means they knew it was coming, which means they know exactly what I am and prepared accordingly. Fantastic. I've been here 4 minutes and I'm already the least informed person in the building. Huang Jisu unfolds his arms slowly. His composure doesn't crack, but I feel something shift underneath it. A careful repositioning, the emotional equivalent of a chess player deciding which piece to move first. Sit down, Yunsi, he says. His voice is exactly what his emotional frequency suggested. Low, unhurried, the kind of voice that doesn't raise itself because it's never had to. A voice that has been obeyed so consistently it's forgotten what resistance looks like. I stay standing. I'll sit when someone answers the question, I say. It's a simple one. I'm not asking for state secrets. I just want to know why 4 alphas who could have their pick of any bonded, fertile, fully certified Omega in Busan specifically requested the one that his own pack traded away for being broken. Minjie makes a sound that is dangerously close to a laugh. I feel his delight spike warm and bright, and I add him immediately to the mental list of people I need to watch carefully, because people who find me entertaining are either going to be my favorite kind of problem or my most exhausting one. Seo Jian's jaw tightens. The tangled heat under his surface shifts but doesn't resolve. Taeyang doesn't move, doesn't feel. The blankness where his emotions should be is starting to crawl under my skin in a way I genuinely dislike. Jisoo gestures toward the low sofa across from him. Not a request this time. Something adjacent to one, but not quite. I sit down. Not because he told me to, because my legs have been tense since I walked in, and I'm choosing comfort strategically. You were specifically selected, Jisoo begins, sitting across from me with the precise posture of a man who was raised to take up exactly the right amount of space and not a centimeter more. Because your profile indicated a unique set of qualities the pack requires. Unique qualities, when I repeat. That's a very clean way to say it. Jisoo Hyung is always clean about things, Min-jae offers from his armchair, cheerfully unhelpful. It's his whole personality. Jisoo doesn't acknowledge this. Neither do I, though I file it away. The pack has been without a house Omega for 4 years, Jisoo continues. The previous arrangement ended due to incompatibility. Incompatibility, I say. With all 4 of you simultaneously? A pause. Yes. That's not incompatibility, I say pleasantly. That's a pattern. Seo Jian's head turns toward me. His emotional signature sharpens, that buried heat pressing closer to the surface. Not anger exactly. Something more complicated. The feeling of a person who expected one thing and got handed something else entirely, and hasn't decided yet whether that's good or bad. You're not what we expected, he says. His voice is clipped and precise in a way that suggests he edits himself constantly, choosing each word after rejecting 6 others. Nobody ever is, I tell him. People keep expecting quiet omegas and then acting personally offended when they get me instead. I don't know what to tell you. The packaging was accurate. Min-jae absolutely loses it. His laugh is loud and completely unguarded, and his joy hits me so cleanly, it almost makes me smile back before I catch myself. Jisoo lets the moment breathe before continuing. Your role here is residential. You'll manage the household schedule, mediate pack communications when necessary, and maintain the shared living spaces. Mediate pack communications, I say slowly, between 4 alphas. Yes. I look at Seo Jian, whose jaw is still tight. I look at Min-jae, who is still grinning. I look at Taeyang, who is looking at a point somewhere past my left shoulder, with the focused detachment of a man deliberately not looking at me. Do you have a hazard pay option, I ask, or is that not part of the package? Jisoo blinks. It's the first micro-expression I've gotten from him, and I collect it like a coin. The compensation was outlined in the agreement. The agreement my father signed without me in the room. Yes, I'm aware. I keep my tone light. Light is useful. Light makes people underestimate you, and underestimated is occasionally the safest thing to be. I'm just establishing expectations. I'm not a quiet presence. I have opinions. I will voice them. If that's a problem, better to surface that now before anyone gets comfortable. The room is quiet for exactly 3 seconds. It's not a problem, Jisoo says. I feel the truth of that, which surprises me more than the words. His composure carries no irritation underneath it. What I feel instead is something I can only describe as carefully managed anticipation. The feeling of a person who has been waiting for something specific and is now watching it begin. That should probably comfort me. It doesn't. I turn to Taeyang because he's the one I can't read, and that is genuinely bothering me the way a splinter bothers you. Less painful than annoying, impossible to ignore. You haven't said anything, I say. He shifts his gaze to me. His eyes are dark in the still and give absolutely nothing away. His emotional silence is so complete it has its own texture, smooth and impenetrable, like a wall that was built too well. I don't have anything to say yet, he says. His voice is quiet, not soft. There's a difference. Soft implies gentleness. His voice is quiet the way deep water is quiet, not because there's nothing there, but because whatever is there doesn't need the surface to prove it. My power pushes against his blankness involuntarily. Just slightly. Just a test. It finds nothing. Slides off, returns to me confused. I feel the exact moment something behind his eyes shifts. Barely. The way a light changes in a room when a cloud moves outside. Enough that I notice. Not enough to name. He knows I just tried to read him, and he is completely unbothered by it. My stomach does something inconvenient. "Welcome to the pack, Jian, Jisoo says. I smile at all four of them with every ounce of the composure I own. I am, I think privately, in so much trouble. Trouble has always found me efficiently. I don't even have to go looking anymore. It just shows up, makes itself comfortable, and starts rearranging my furniture. Dongyan shows me to my room on the second floor, east wing, third door from the staircase. The room is larger than my entire childhood bedroom, by a margin that feels almost aggressive. Clean white walls, a wide window overlooking the courtyard, a proper desk, a bed with actual quality linens that haven't been washed into translucency from overuse. I stand in the doorway for a moment, just taking it in. My power is still buzzing from the main room encounter, residual static from four distinct alpha presences, all compressed into one space. I feel it settling slowly, the way water settles after you've disturbed it, finding its own level again. I set my bag on the bed and unzip it. One change of clothes. Two books I've read before, but find comforting. A phone charger. A small frame photo I almost didn't pack and then packed anyway, because 22 is too young to be completely unsentimental. Basic toiletries in a travel bag that has seen better days. Packing light as instructed. I am halfway through transferring my things to the dresser when I feel it. A presence in the hallway outside my door. Standing still. Not approaching, not retreating. Just existing approximately 2 meters from my doorframe with the particular quality of someone who came with a purpose and then reconsidered it. I know the emotional signature immediately. Warm, bright, aggressively curious, currently wrestling with whether to knock. I cross the room and open the door before he can decide. Minjae blinks at me from the hallway, hand raised mid-reach. He looks exactly as he did downstairs, except somehow more real in the narrower space. Broad shoulders almost filling the hallway, that grin already reassembling itself from surprise back to default. "I was going to knock," he says. "I know," I say. "You were also going to talk yourself out of it. You had about 4 more seconds." He stares at me. Something bright and new moves through his emotional frequency, genuine fascination with the texture of someone who has just confirmed something he suspected. "They said you were perceptive," he says. "They undersold it," I tell him. "What do you want, Minjesi?" He leans his shoulder against the doorframe with the ease of someone who is physically comfortable everywhere and has never once questioned whether he belongs in a space. Jisoo Hyung does the formal welcome. Seo Jian ignores new people for the first week as a matter of principle. Taeyang just, he pauses, searching for the word, exists atmospherically. So I figured someone should actually check if you need anything. I look at him for a moment. His warmth is genuine. That's the thing about Minjae that I can already tell is going to be complicated. He doesn't perform openness. He just is open, which in my experience is either the most trustworthy thing a person can be or the most dangerous, depending entirely on what they're open about. "I need the Wi-Fi password," I say, "and I need to know where the kitchen is. And I need someone to explain what mediating pack communications actually means in practice before I accidentally walk into something I don't have context for." Minjae pushes off the doorframe. "Kitchen first. I'll explain on the way." The kitchen is at the back of the house, large and well-stocked with the particular organization of a space that has been maintained by someone methodical. Everything labeled, everything in its place. I file this detail about Jisoo away for later because this kitchen has his emotional fingerprints all over it. Minjae puts the kettle on without asking if I want tea, which I decide to let go because the answer is yes, and he somehow already knows it. "Pack communications," he starts, settling against the counter, "means mostly us. We don't fight loudly. We do the worst thing, which is go completely silent at each other for days at a time until someone says something that makes it worse." "Functional," I say. "Incredibly." He grins. "Jisoo Hyung manages the pack externally. No problems. Internally, he has the emotional communication style of a sealed envelope. Seo Jian takes everything personally and refuses to admit it. Taiyang, he stops again. Atmospherically exists, I supply. Exactly. And I apparently make everything worse by trying to fix it too fast and saying the wrong thing with complete sincerity. He shrugs, unbothered by his own assessment. The last Omega lasted 6 months before he requested relocation. We weren't mean to him. He just said it was like living inside a pressure system that never resolved. I accept the mug he pushes toward me. The tea is the right temperature immediately, which means he judged the steep time correctly without measuring, which means he pays attention to things without being asked to. I file that away too. Why me specifically, I say. Not a question this time. A statement I'm leaving open on purpose to see what he fills it with. Min-jae wraps both hands around his own mug. His warmth doesn't dim exactly, but it shifts, takes on a more deliberate quality. The feeling of someone choosing how much of a truth to give. Jisoo Hyung found your file 8 months ago, he says carefully. Your ability profile, not just the fertility assessment, the full empathic evaluation your old pack documented before they. He pauses. Before they decided it was easier to classify you as unstable than figure out what you actually are. The word unstable lands in my chest with the specific weight of something I've heard before. Often enough that I should be immune to it. I'm not. And instead of also deciding it was easier to classify me as unstable, I say, keeping my voice level, Jisoo decided to import me. Jisoo decided you were exactly what this pack needed, Min-jae says. Quiet now. The brightness in him steadied into something more serious. Whether that was fair to you is a different question, one I think you should ask him directly. Before I can respond, the kitchen doorway fills with a presence I recognize instantly. Not by sound, not by sight, by the complete and total absence of anything my power can grab onto. Taeyang stands in the doorway, holding an empty glass, looking at neither of us in particular. The silence he carries settles over the kitchen like a second ceiling. My power slams against his blankness so hard my fingers tighten around my mug. He looks at me then, direct, unhurried. You're doing it again, he says quietly. My face goes carefully neutral. I don't know what you mean, I say. His expression doesn't change, but something behind his eyes does. Yes, you do, he says. The problem with being told yes, you do by someone whose emotions you cannot read is that you have absolutely no information to work with. No guilt underneath it. No satisfaction. No tell. Just those 3 quiet words sitting in the kitchen air like they own the square footage. I take a slow sip of my tea. I hold eye contact with Taeyang over the rim of my mug because I have never in my life backed down from a staring contest, and I am not starting today. You're very confident for someone who just walked in for a glass of water, I say. He crosses to the sink, fills his glass. His movements are unhurried and completely unbothered in a way that makes something in my chest tighten with pure, competitive irritation. I came for water, he agrees. The observation was free. Min-jae looks between us with the bright, fascinated energy of someone watching a tennis match they didn't expect to enjoy this much. Taeyang takes his water and leaves the kitchen as quietly as he arrived. No dramatic exit, no parting line, just the absence of him replacing the presence of him, and somehow the kitchen feels both larger and stranger once he's gone. I set my mug down with more care than necessary. Does he do that to everyone? I ask. No, Minji says, sounding genuinely delighted. Just you, apparently. Wonderful. That's wonderful news. Absolutely nothing about that is concerning. I finish my tea. I rinse my mug because I was raised with manners regardless of circumstances, and I tell Minjae I need an hour to finish settling in. He gives me the Wi-Fi password, which is HwangPak 2019, with no creativity whatsoever, and points me back toward the staircase. The upper hallway is quiet when I return to it. 4 doors visible from where I stand, all closed. The house has a specific stillness to it that isn't empty. More like held breath, like a space that has been waiting for its correct number of occupants and hasn't been sure until recently that it had them. I notice things as I walk, small details that build a picture. Seo Jian's door has a dry erase board mounted on it with a schedule written in handwriting so precise it looks typeset. Every hour accounted for. Every task categorized. The bored of a person who controls his external environment because something internal refuses to stay organized. I feel his emotional signature through the door as I pass. That tangled heat, still unresolved, and underneath it's something I finally find a word for. Grief. Old grief. The kind that has been lived with so long it stops feeling like grief and starts feeling like furniture. You stop noticing it until someone points at it, and then you can't stop seeing it everywhere. I don't stop walking. Reading someone through a closed door without their knowledge feels like a violation, even for me. So I pull my attention back and keep moving. My room settles around me when I return to it. I finish unpacking. I sit at the desk and open my phone and spend approximately 11 minutes pretending to read something before accepting that I'm actually just processing. Here is what I know. Jisoo found my file 8 months ago. He reviewed my empathic ability profile, the one my former pack documented as evidence of instability, and decided it was something else, something useful. He arranged this transfer with the kind of quiet, deliberate patience that suggests he is a person who plays long games and wins them. That should make me feel like an asset being deployed. It mostly does. Somewhere underneath that, a smaller and more inconvenient feeling suggests that being chosen for what you can do and being chosen for who you are occupy different emotional zip codes. I know Minjai is genuine. I know Seo Jian is carrying something heavy he hasn't put down. I know Jisoo controls every room he stands in, including the ones he isn't standing in. And I know Taeyong is a complete mystery that my power cannot crack, and that he is somehow aware of my attempts. Which brings me to the question I can't stop turning over. What is he? Empathic blocking isn't a documented ability in any pack literature I've come across. Emotional resistance? Yes. Some alphas are naturally harder to read than others. Their frequencies quieter, more contained. But complete blankness? A total absence of readable signal? That isn't resistance. That's something else. A knock at my door interrupts this thought. Not Minjae's energy this time. Sharper, more deliberate. The knock of someone who considered not coming and came anyway. I open the door. Seo Jian stands in the hallway in a dark sweater and the expression of a man attending a meeting he scheduled himself and already regrets. His emotional signature hits me immediately, that familiar tangle, and up close the grief I sense through his door is louder, pressed down but present, breathing under everything else like something that hasn't been allowed enough air. I wanted to clarify something from earlier, he says. Come in, I say, stepping back. He enters but doesn't sit. People who don't sit in other people's spaces are either deeply respectful of boundaries or deeply uncomfortable in unfamiliar territory. With Seo Jian, I suspect it's both simultaneously. I said you weren't what we expected, he starts. His voice has that edited quality again, each word chosen and placed with intention. I want you to understand that wasn't a criticism. I know, I say. It was an observation. You were recalibrating. He looks at me with an expression that is not quite discomfort and not quite relief, and lands somewhere between them. You do that often. Finish what people are thinking. Occupational hazard, I say. He is quiet for a moment. I let him be quiet because some people need the space to arrive at the thing they actually came to say, and rushing them just sends them back to the rehearsed version. The previous Omega, he starts, stops. The grief shifts under his surface like something turning over in deep water. His leaving wasn't about all four of us equally. I go very still. It was mostly because of me, Seo Jian says. He says it flatly with the particular tone of someone who has rehearsed an honest thing until it stopped hurting and then discovered it still hurts. The room is quiet. His grief presses against my power like a hand against glass. Without meaning to, without choosing to, I feel it flood into me fully. And then, because my power has terrible timing and absolutely no manners, I feel it push back out. Seo Jian's breath catches. His eyes go wide. For one suspended second, his entire carefully maintained composure cracks straight down the middle, and what's underneath is raw and exhausted and so achingly human that my own chest tightens in response. What, he says, very quietly, was that? I close my eyes briefly. That, I say, is the part of my profile your pack leader didn't warn you about. Seo Jian stares at me for a long time. Not the polite kind of staring. The kind that happens when a person's brain is running faster than their expression can keep up with. His jaw is set. His eyes are doing something complicated. His emotional frequency, usually that tight compressed tangle, has gone oddly still in the aftermath of what just happened, like water after a stone has already sunk. You pushed your emotions into me, he says finally. Technically, I pushed yours back into you, I say. I felt your grief and it came back out amplified. I didn't do it on purpose. My power doesn't always ask permission before it does things. We have a complicated working relationship. He processes this. I watch him do it. The careful, methodical way he approaches information, turning it over, checking the edges. The profile said empathic projection, he says. It didn't say involuntary. The profile was written by people who were scared of me and trying to make the documentation sound clinical instead of alarming. I sit on the edge of my desk because standing in front of Seo Jian while he processes a personal emotional detonation feels unnecessarily confrontational. Whatever Jisoo told you I could do, the reality has more texture than the file. Something shifts in Seo Jian's face. Not softness exactly. More like the recalibration I named earlier, happening again, deeper this time. He needs to know this, he says. I assumed he already did, I say. Not this specifically. Seo Jian moves toward my door with the decisive energy of a man redirecting. He stops with his hand on the frame and looks back at me, and his grief is quieter now. Not gone, but settled, like something that has been acknowledged and given a proper place to sit. For what it's worth, he says, and then stops. You don't have to say it, I tell him. I want to. He holds eye contact. What you just did. Feeling that, even accidentally. A pause. Nobody in this house has felt that particular thing from me, ever. He leaves before I can respond. I sit with that for exactly 30 seconds. Then I get up and follow him downstairs because I have questions for Hwang Jisoo, and they are no longer the kind of questions I'm willing to save for a more convenient moment. The main room is empty. Minjae's cheerful frequency is coming from somewhere toward the back garden. Seo Jian's edited presence moves toward the study at the end of the ground floor hallway. Jisoo is in the study. I feel his composure before I reach the door. That cool, flat steadiness, and underneath it, the careful anticipation I noticed in the main room earlier. Still there. Waiting. I knock once and open the door without waiting for an answer, because I find that strategy communicates a useful amount of information about a person's intentions up front. Jisoo looks up from his desk. He is unsurprised. The anticipation under his composure shifts slightly, tightening. The feeling of a person watching something they prepared for finally arrive. Jian-si, he says. You knew exactly what my power does, I say. I cross the room and sit in the chair across from his desk without being invited, because I am done being managed into positions of deference today. Not just the clinical description, the actual reality of it, the involuntary transmission, the amplification, the fact that I can't fully control it around alphas. I hold his gaze. You knew and you brought me here anyway, so I want to know why. The real reason, not the version about pack communications. Jisoo sets down his pen. He looks at me with the expression of a man who has been waiting for this exact conversation and has had the answer prepared for longer than I've been in this house. Yes, he says simply. I knew. Then explain it to me. He folds his hands on the desk, measured, unhurried. 8 months ago, this pack experienced an internal fracture, not external. No rival pack, no territory dispute. Something that happened between us, inside these walls, that I could not resolve through any conventional means. I wait. His composure is steady, but I feel the weight behind it now, dense and pressurized, the feeling of something that has been held together by sheer will for a very long time. Seo Jian lost someone, Jisoo continues, a person he had brought into his life without telling the rest of us. When that person left, it affected him in ways he won't discuss and can't seem to move through. Minjae responds to Seo Jian's pain by overcompensating until Seo Jian pushes back. When Seo Jian pushes back, Minjae goes quiet. When Minjae goes quiet, the entire emotional temperature of this house drops. He pauses. And Taiyang. He stops on Taiyang's name in a way that has its own specific gravity. What about Taiyang? I say carefully. Jisu's composure remains intact, but I feel something move underneath it. Not grief, not quite. Something older and more settled. The feeling of a person who has accepted a painful thing and lives alongside it daily. Taiyang built his block 7 years ago, Jisu says, after something happened that I won't detail without his permission. What I can tell you is that he has not allowed anyone to read him since. Not me, not Minjae, nobody. He meets my eyes. Until you walked into this house this morning, and I watched him react to your presence for the first time in 7 years. My throat does something involuntary. He reacted, I say. His block held. I couldn't read anything. His block held, Jisu agrees, but he felt you trying, and he came to the kitchen. He lets that land. Taiyang has not voluntarily entered a shared space within the first hour of a new person's arrival in 4 years. The study is very quiet. I hear the garden outside, Minja's distant laugh, the city beyond the walls doing its indifferent city things. You brought me here, I say slowly, to fix them. I brought you here, Jisu says, because this pack is breaking quietly and I am running out of ways to hold it together alone. His composure doesn't crack, but the weight behind it is suddenly fully visible, enormous and exhausted. I won't pretend that was entirely fair to you. Something about his honesty hits me sideways. I look at Huang Jisu, packhead, 29 years old, sitting behind his desk holding an entire fractured household, together with both hands and not a single person to hold him back. My power reaches toward him without my permission. And for the first time I feel what lives underneath Jisu's composure. Bone-deep loneliness. My breath catches. His eyes meet mine. He felt it. He knows I felt it. Neither of us says a single word. The silence between us breathes. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that happens when two people have just seen something real about each other, and neither one has decided yet what to do with the information. Jisu doesn't look away. I don't either. His loneliness sits in my chest like borrowed weight, heavy and specific. The particular ache of a person who holds everyone else together and has quietly forgotten to leave room for himself inside that arrangement. I am not going to cry in front of Huang Jisu 20 minutes into my first day here. I want to be clear about that as a personal boundary and a matter of dignity. I take a slow breath. I pull my power back with both hands, metaphorically speaking, hauling it in the way you haul a kite string in a strong wind. The loneliness recedes to a manageable level, still present, still his, just no longer sitting directly on top of my sternum. Okay, I say. Jisu blinks. Okay. I'm not leaving, I clarify, in case that was the part you were waiting to find out. I'm not going to pack my single bag and call Dongyun and request relocation just because you were honest with me. I lean back in the chair. Frankly, the honesty is the first thing that's happened today that I actually respect. Something in Jisu's face moves. Barely. The emotional equivalent of a window opening 1 centimeter in a sealed room. That being said, I continue, we're establishing some things right now before I go back upstairs. First, my power is not a tool you get to schedule. It doesn't work on command, and I won't pretend otherwise. Second, whatever you think I can fix in this pack, I need actual information to work with, not managed summaries. Third, I hold up 3 fingers for emphasis because apparently I'm that person today. If anyone in this house uses the word unstable in reference to me, I will make them feel genuinely terrible about it, and I will not apologize. Jisu looks at me for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth moves. It is not quite a smile. It is the architectural sketch of one, suggesting the finished version exists somewhere and might occasionally make an appearance. Agreed, he says. Great. I stand up. Now tell me what happened to Taiyang. The almost smile disappears. His composure reassembles itself with the practiced speed of long habit. That's his to tell. I know, I say. I'm asking what you're willing to give me, so I don't walk into it blind. Jisu considers this with the careful deliberation of a man weighing exactly how much truth serves the situation. 7 years ago, Taeyang was bonded, he says finally. The bond was severed. Not naturally. The words land quietly, but the weight of them is not quiet at all. A severed bond. not a failed one, not a mutual dissolution, severed. The difference between those things is the difference between a door closing and a door being taken off its hinges. That's why he built the block, I say. The block came after, Jisoo says. What came immediately after was worse. The block was actually an improvement. I don't ask what worse looked like. The grief in Jisoo's composure when he says it tells me enough. I leave the study with more information and more questions than I arrived with, which seems to be the consistent experience of existing in this house. The hallway is quiet. Seo Jian's door is closed again, his schedule board unchanged, his emotional signature behind it steadier than before. The grief still present, but the raw edge of it smoothed slightly. Something about that makes a small warmth move through my chest. Not pride exactly. Closer to the satisfaction of having done something real without meaning to. Minjae is coming in from the back garden when I reach the bottom of the stairs, cheeks slightly flushed from the outside air, a half-eaten tangerine in his hand. He looks up at me with that immediate brightness, reads something in my face, and tilts his head. "How did the Jisoo conversation go?" he asks. "He explained things," I say. "I set parameters. We reached an understanding." Minjae peels another segment of tangerine. "He doesn't usually explain things. He explained them to me." Minjae studies me with that warm, curious frequency, and underneath the brightness, I feel something new now that I'm paying closer attention, something layered and careful. Minjae presents as open, functions as open, and is genuinely open in most directions. But there is one specific direction he keeps a door closed in, and it is pointed, I realize with a small shock of clarity, directly at Seo Jian. Not romantic, older than romantic. The specific ache of someone who has watched a person they love suffer for a long time and has run out of ways to help and has started blaming themselves for the running out. I file this away with extreme care because it is not mine to touch without permission. "Go check on Seo Jian," I say casually, moving past him toward the kitchen. Minjae goes very still. "What?" "He had a moment earlier. He's fine now, but he could use." I consider the right word. Presence, not fixing, just someone being in the same room without an agenda. Minjae stares at me with an expression I can't fully categorize. "You've been here 4 hours," he says. "I'm aware." "How are you?" He stops, starts again. "How do you do that?" I take a tangerine segment from his hand because I haven't eaten since this morning and I earn it. "Occupational hazard," I say. "Go." He goes. I am standing in the kitchen doorway eating borrowed citrus and feeling moderately good about the last 10 minutes when the hairs on the back of my neck stand up with zero warning. Taeyang is sitting at the kitchen table. He was not there when I looked 30 seconds ago. He is there now. With his water glass and his atmospheric existence and his complete emotional blankness, reading something on his phone with total apparent indifference to my presence. I walk into the kitchen, I get a glass of water. I sit down across from him because running from things I don't understand has never once been my strategy. We sit in silence for 11 seconds. I count. "You told Minjae to go to Seo Jian," Taeyang says without looking up. "I did," I say. "Why?" "Because he needed to, and he wouldn't have done it without a push." Taeyang looks up from his phone. Those dark, still eyes find mine across the table, and my power throws itself at his blankness again. Automatic, involuntary, a compass needle swinging hard toward a magnetic field it cannot locate. He watches it happen. I see him watch it happen. "Does it hurt?" he asks quietly, "when it can't find anything?" My whole chest goes strange. "Yes," I say honestly before I can decide not to. Something behind his eyes shifts. That same barely there movement I caught this morning. The light changing when a cloud moves outside. His hand on the table moves exactly 3 centimeters toward mine, then stops. "I'm sorry," he says. And then before I can respond to what is clearly the most words Huang Tiang has voluntarily offered anyone in recent memory, he stands, takes his glass, and leaves the kitchen with the same quiet efficiency he arrived with. I stare at the 3 centimeters of table between where his hand stopped and where mine is sitting. My power is completely silent for the first time all day. Not because it found nothing, because for 1 single second, through whatever wall Taeyang has built around himself, I felt something flicker. Small, warm, gone before I could name it, but real, real. That one word sits in the center of my chest and refuses to move. I have felt thousands of emotions from hundreds of people across my entire life. I know the difference between a genuine signal and a projected one, between something borrowed and something that originates from inside a specific person. What just flickered through Taeyang's wall for that single unguarded second was not borrowed. It was not residual. It came from him, and it was directed specifically and unmistakably at me. I sit at the kitchen table for another full minute, doing absolutely nothing. Then I press both palms flat on the table surface, stand up with the energy of someone making a decision, and go back upstairs to my room because I need 30 seconds of privacy to be quietly alarmed before I put my functional face back on. The alarm lasts approximately 20 seconds. Then I wash my face, change into something more comfortable, and open my door to begin what Jisoo technically brought me here to do. The house in the late afternoon has a different texture than it did this morning. Less performative. The careful composure people wear for first impressions has softened at the edges, and what replaces it is more honest and therefore more useful. I do a slow walk through the shared spaces with my power dialed back to its quietest register. Just enough to take temperature readings without intruding. The study door is closed, Jisoo's steady frequency behind it working through something with the focused intensity of a man who processes emotion by being productive. Understandable. Slightly concerning as a long-term strategy, but understandable. From upstairs, I feel Seo Jian and Minjae in the same room. Not arguing, not performing normalcy at each other. Actually quiet together in a way that has a different quality than the silence I felt in this house when I arrived. This silence has texture. It breathes. Something about that loosens a tight thing in my chest that I didn't notice was tight until it wasn't. I find the living room empty and decide it's as good a place as any to exist without purpose for a few minutes, which is something I am historically terrible at, but attempting as a growth exercise. The room faces the inner courtyard. Late sun comes through the glass at a low angle and makes the wooden floor look warmer than it is. I sit on the larger sofa and pull my knees up and look at the courtyard and let my power rest. It lasts 4 minutes before Taeyang walks in. He stops when he sees me, not with surprise exactly. More like the momentary recalibration of someone who calculated the room would be empty and has to adjust the calculation. He could leave. The pause contains that option clearly. He doesn't leave. He crosses to the armchair nearest the window, the one angled slightly away from the sofa, and sits. He has a book. He opens it. He begins reading with every appearance of a person who is simply occupying a room and not making any particular choices about it. I watch him for exactly 3 seconds. You know, I say pleasantly, most people who want to pretend they're not thinking about something pick a room the other person isn't already in. Taeyang turns a page. I wanted this chair. There are 4 other chairs in this room. I wanted this specific chair. I press my lips together against something that wants to be a smile. Okay, we exist in the same space. My power sits at the edge of his blankness, like water against a glass wall, not pushing, just present, aware. After a few minutes, Taeyang says, without looking up from his book, ask what you want to ask. I turn my head toward him. How do you know I want to ask something? You've been quiet for 4 minutes, he says. Based on today's data, that's approximately 3.5 minutes longer than your natural tolerance. I stare at him. You've been collecting data on me. Everyone collects data, he says. You do it with your power. I do it with attention. There is something in that sentence that lands differently than he probably intended, or possibly exactly as he intended. With Taeyang, I am discovering that the gap between those two options is impossible to measure. Fine, I say. Your bond was severed, not naturally. Jisoo told me that much. I keep my voice even, and I watch his hands on the book, and I feel the blankness, and through the blankness, very faint, the first suggestion of pressure, like something behind a wall leaning against it. You built the block after. Not immediately after, which means something happened between the severing and the block that was bad enough to make total emotional invisibility feel like the better option. Taeyang's hands are still on the book. You don't have to tell me, I say. I'm not asking because I need the information to do whatever Jisoo brought me here to do. I'm asking because I felt something from you in this kitchen 20 minutes ago, and it was the first real signal I've gotten through that wall, and I think you let it through on purpose, even if you won't admit that yet. The room is very quiet. Outside the courtyard, the light is going golden and long. Somewhere in the house, I can feel Min-jae's warmth moving toward the kitchen, the domestic comfort of someone starting dinner. Seo Jian's frequency coming gradually downstairs, lighter than it has been all day. Taeyang closes his book. He doesn't look at me immediately. He looks at the courtyard, at the light, at something in the middle distance that I cannot see and my power cannot touch. His name was Chajiho, he says quietly. We bonded at 21. By 22, he had decided the bond was inconvenient for something he wanted more. A pause, each word placed with the careful deliberation of someone handling something that still cuts. He didn't ask for a dissolution. He went to someone who could sever it externally, without my knowledge, without my presence. My breath goes very still. I felt it happen, Taeyang continues, from across the city. One moment he was there, and then he was gone, and the place where the bond had been was just, he stops, empty. My power does something I have never felt it do before. It doesn't push toward him. It doesn't reach or test or probe. It simply sits beside the wall he built and stays there, quietly, without agenda, like company for something that has been alone too long. Taeyang finally turns to look at me. His dark eyes find mine, and for the first time today there is something visible in them. Not the flicker from the kitchen, something steadier, something that has decided, carefully and deliberately, to be seen. That's why the block, he says. I know, I say softly. His jaw tightens slightly. Not against emotion, against something else. Something that looks from the outside exactly like the very beginning of trust. You're not what I expected, he says. So I've been told, I say. I'm starting to think that's the nicest thing anyone in this house knows how to say. The corner of his mouth moves, not a smile. The place where one might eventually grow, given enough time and the right conditions. My heart does something completely inconvenient and medically unnecessary. From the kitchen, Min-jae calls out that dinner is ready, and his joy floods the house warm and gold as the evening light outside, and for one suspended moment, the entire fractured Huang pack breathes at the same frequency. My power goes perfectly, peacefully quiet. And underneath that quiet, small and new and terrifying, something that feels like belonging takes its first tentative breath. Dinner in the Huang pack house is nothing like I expected. I don't know what I expected exactly. Something formal maybe, assigned seats and careful conversation, and the specific performance of civility that people put on when they're trying to impress someone new. What I get instead is Minji standing at the stove aggressively over-seasoning japchae while narrating every decision out loud to nobody in particular. Seo Jian sitting at the kitchen table correcting what sounds like a work document on his tablet with the focused energy of a man pretending he isn't also listening to everything Minji says, and Jisoo pouring water into glasses with the quiet efficiency of someone who has decided that contribution is contribution, regardless of scale. Taeyang sits across from me. He doesn't look at me constantly. He looks at me the way you look at something you're still deciding about. Measured intervals, thoughtful, like he's building something careful and doesn't want to rush the architecture. I look back when he does because I have never learned the art of pretending not to notice things, and it's too late to start now. You're staring, Minji announces cheerfully, pointing his cooking chopsticks in our general direction without turning around. I'm observing, I say. Jen Shi is a naturally observant person, Taeyang says, with complete straightforward seriousness. Minji drops his chopsticks into the pan by accident. Seo Jian looks up from his tablet. Jisoo pauses mid-pour. I think all four of us just experienced Huang Taeyang voluntarily defending someone for the first time in recent memory. Taeyang picks up his water glass and drinks from it with total composure. Dinner happens. Real dinner. The kind with actual conversation that builds on itself instead of starting over every few sentences. Minji talks easily and often, filling the spaces generously without trampling them. Seo Jian contributes in precise targeted sentences that land with more weight than 3 paragraphs from anyone else would. Jisoo asks questions instead of making statements, which I recognize as the communication strategy of someone who learned that questions give people more room to be honest. And Taeyang, mostly quiet, occasionally says something so unexpectedly dry that the whole table pauses before laughing. My power sits warm and easy in my chest the entire meal. Not silent, but not straining either. The four emotional frequencies around me have stopped feeling like competing signals and started feeling like something else. Something I don't name yet because naming new things too early is how you scare them away. After dinner, Minjae washes dishes with theatrical suffering. I dry them without being asked, which makes him look at me like I've performed a small miracle. Seo Jian puts away what we dry with the practiced efficiency of someone who knows where everything goes without checking. Jisoo disappears briefly and returns with a box of banana milk from some refrigerator I haven't located yet and distributes them without comment. I accept mine. I do not make fun of the banana milk. I drink it. It is exactly as good as it has always been, and the normalcy of that, the specific ordinary comfort of standing in a kitchen in Busan, drinking banana milk with four alphas after dinner, hits me somewhere behind the sternum with a force that is wildly disproportionate to the situation. I grew up feeling every room's emotional temperature the second I entered it. Every space I've ever occupied has carried the weight of other people's feelings pressing against me. Their contempt, their pity, their discomfort, their relief when I left. I have spent 22 years being the thing a room's emotions happen to. This kitchen right now, at this specific unremarkable moment, is the first space I have ever stood in where the emotions pressing against me feel like an invitation rather than a verdict. I am thinking about this with perhaps more intensity than banana milk warrants when my power does something new. It doesn't reach outward, it doesn't push or probe or absorb. It pulses, one single warm pulse outward from my chest in every direction simultaneously, completely without my permission or participation, and every person in the kitchen goes still at exactly the same moment. Minja's hand stops on the dish he's washing. Seo Jian's breath catches audibly. Jisoo sets his banana milk down with slow, deliberate care. Taeyang, across the kitchen, turns to look at me with an expression I have not seen on him yet. Not the careful measurement, not the deliberate stillness. Something open, something that got there before his control could stop it. They all felt it. Whatever I just sent out, they all felt it simultaneously. And from the way four different people are looking at me with four different versions of the same stunned expression, it was not subtle. That was, Minjae starts. I know, I say. My voice comes out steadier than I feel. What was that? Seo Jian says. Not accusing, asking. His voice has lost its edited quality entirely, just the raw question underneath. I don't know, I say honestly. My power has never done that before. Jisoo is looking at me with an expression that for the first time today has no managed quality whatsoever. His composure is simply gone, replaced by something unguarded and searching and almost young. What did you feel, he asked carefully, before it happened? I open my mouth, I close it, because the honest answer is belonging, and I am not ready to say that word out loud in this kitchen to these four people on my first day in this house. The honest answer is that for one unguarded second, I felt something I have spent 22 years being told a person like me doesn't get to have in my power, with its catastrophic timing and complete absence of self-preservation instinct, broadcasted to every alpha in the room before I could stop it. My power pulses again, smaller this time, like an echo. Taeyang takes one step toward me across the kitchen floor. Just one, slow and deliberate, the way you move towards something you're not sure will stay. His blankness is still there. The wall is still there, but through it, through whatever hairline fracture my pulse just found, I feel something reaching back. Not a flicker this time, a current, warm and steady and unmistakably his, pressing through the wall from the other side like a hand against glass. My breath stops. His eyes hold mine across the kitchen, and his mouth opens, and what comes out of Huang Tiang? The man who has not let anyone inside his walls in 7 years, the man whose bond was severed without his knowledge while he felt it happen from across an entire city, is 4 words. 4 quiet, devastating, irrevocable words. I felt you first. The banana milk in my hand hits the kitchen floor. Nobody moves. Outside, the Busan night presses warm and close against the windows, the port lights blinking gold across the water, the city breathing on without us. And somewhere in the walls of this house, something that was broken for a very long time makes a sound like it's trying to remember how to heal. My power surges. Every light in the house goes out. 22 years old, traded away by his own family, told he was broken, barren, and not worth keeping. And yet every light in that house just went out because of him. Four alphas felt his heart beat through the walls. And the one man who has been untouchable for 7 years just crossed a kitchen floor and said four words that changed everything. If you watched all the way to this moment, thank you. Truly, you have no idea how much that means. You know what to do, like. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you next time.